I got this feeling in my gut that said, it's time to go to Nashville. You're ready. Now, at this point, I'm full-time music. So I'm like, okay, I really can just go and immerse myself. I went full-time music in 2010. And it just, I can't explain it other than it was just like, go. And so that's what took me there in November of 2011. And then I essentially threw out everything I thought I knew about anything. And just from the ground up, I would go to songwriter rounds and go up to complete strangers and just say, I want to write with you. And they'd be like, okay, let's start with coffee. I'm like, no, really, we should write a song. I even remember one, I was like, oh, let's write together. And like, okay. And it took us about 3 years of getting to know each other before we got to write together. But it really is, that craftsmanship that happens with songwriting. Yes, you can get really lucky on a first song. I am not that girl. It took me a lot of songs to really learn the craft, and I'm still, I still have so much to learn, but that was really incredible. And by, spring of 2012, I was performing at my very first CMA Music Festival, which was my first time going to it.
All right, welcome to The Path Distilled. I'm your host, Kevin Harris. My co-host is Lauren Tashman.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show today.
And we're so excited to have Stephanie Quayle. She's Rolling Stone Country's one to watch, top artist you need to know, CMT's Next Women of Country. She's an entrepreneur, country music recording artist, best known for What You're Drinking About, Selfish, and If I Was a Cowboy. Thank you for joining us today, Stephanie.
What an introduction. Thank you. It's awesome to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm glad that technology is being our friend today. Like, Wi-Fi is working. Woohoo!
At least for now. We'll see what happens.
Yes. Right. I should have just kept my mouth shut, but I'll knock on some wood.
So if you would, give us a brief overview of kind of who you are and what you're doing right now.
Absolutely. So I'm a country artist. I've been living in Nashville for the last, I think it's coming up on 9 years, but I have been quarantining at our farm in North Carolina, which is just north of Greensboro. It's called Summerfield Farms. So a farm never sleeps. So I figured, okay, I'll go to where I know I can, do something and be helpful. So we've been open this entire time. Part of our farm has, we do a lot of weddings and events, so that part hasn't been able to be open, but we have a little grocery store. And so that's considered essential. So we've really been able to help our community. So now I know nothing about sports. So if I say this wrong, be gentle, friends watching. But my husband does. And I refer to myself as the pinch hitter, the one that is there when needed. So people ask me all the time, like, what are you doing? I go, well, I might be doing a virtual concert and then throwing on my muck boots and going and moving cattle. Like every day is different to working in the market. So it's been a really interesting time to navigate how to continue my music business, how to help with our business here on the farm and exist. That's existing right now is interesting. And then also to be with my husband for the first time in the history of our marriage for this. I mean, usually I'm on the road 5 days a week. So we only really get 2 days a week together sometimes. And so we really like each other. This is great. It's like, awesome. Okay, we did the right thing.
I think other people have not been so lucky and have maybe realized the opposite. I hear.
Yeah, we've and I feel like it's a spectrum of either babies or divorces. It's just wild, but it's a really wild time. Are you guys feeling the same? It's just, it's being nimble. I feel like you just have to be able to ride the wave.
Definitely. And I have to say, my wife and I have had a similar experience. We've enjoyed the time together, and I think Lauren's been stuck in the epicenter, so I think she's ready to get outside for a while.
New York City, it's been nice to actually start the reopening and the beginning phases here. But yes, with myself and with a lot of the clients I work with, the word pivot has come up a lot recently.
Pivot, words of COVID. Like there should actually be its own little dictionary. Sure. Nimble, unprecedented, pivot. It's so true though. And I think what's really special though, I'm just one of those people that I'm so grateful for the glass. I'm always a half full, but I'm really grateful to have the glass. And I look at it like an opportunity. Like, how do you make the most of everything that we're being handed right now? And it's an opportunity for so much growth, not only internally, but with our family, our friends, and then extended to our communities and everything else. And there's just a heightened awareness I feel like we've been lacking because we've all been too busy, or we've used that as our excuse, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
And so I find myself observing, and I'm a super chatty person, obviously, and listening more than ever.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good outlook too. So you're a Montana native, correct?
Yes,
So
born and raised.
yeah, so take us back. What's the beginning of your story?
Oh my goodness. So we'll go way back. So, well, my mom says that I came out of the womb singing, but I'm sure she just says that because she's my mom. So my parents actually divorced when I was little. I believe I was like right around 3, and my mom remarried the farm side of what would become my childhood. She married my stepdad was a veterinarian, and we had cattle and bison, and the veterinary clinic was right on our farm. So it was just, work ethic was kind of ingrained from a very teeny tiny age from both my parents. My dad's an entrepreneur on stage. He's constantly creating, and on a farm, like I said, a farm never sleeps. So you really learn the power of earning your time. And for me, that was on the back of a horse. So I knew if I got all my chores done, that I would get to ride my horse. And I think, I really truly feel that this little AM radio, silver, on the windowsill in our horse barn, playing traditional country music 24/7 is what just got inside this head of mine. And not to mention, my mom is an extraordinary singer. So she was always singing, everything from Reba to Motown to Joni Mitchell. So it was just wide open, and I think that that's really what impacted my influences in music, was that there were no fences. It was just like Montana, just wide open. And so I really got to explore and kind of find my voice through all these different, influences. Not to mention, I started writing this, poetry. I was a very deep 7-year-old. I was very emotional. It totally makes sense that I'm a country artist. I'm like, I can bring that drama when we need it. And so the poetry was really what started my songwriting, and I started on piano. My step grandmother was a piano teacher, and let me tell you, if you want to learn piano from a farmer, it's serious business. And so that was my first instrument, and then I picked up guitar and just started, playing with these 3 chords and my truth, and just started that. And it wasn't till I was 16 years old I ended up doing an exchange program my junior year of high school. And this was my way of running away legally. I didn't have a easy time in high school. My freshman year, I got bullied pretty extensively, and it just was not, I just kept saying to myself, there's gotta be more. And so how I handled that was I immediately enrolled myself in karate, and I was like, okay, all right, I got to get a little stronger. And then with the exchange program, it was such a great way to see, okay, what's out there, what's beyond, what I'm, going through right now. So I ended up in Freiburg, Switzerland, of all places. So I love the French language. I always have. My mom would sing to me in French. And so I was like, I'll go to France. And then my parents were like, okay, if you're going to do this, like, let's see what all the options are. And I ended up in Freiburg, Switzerland. And kid you not, the first month, I'm at this little cafe with my host brother, and there's a band right beside us talking about how their lead singer had just moved back to Germany. And me not being subtle at all, I'm like, hey, I sing, and can I know, like, would you let me play with you guys? And they're like, well, come audition for us. And that was the beginning, you guys. That was the first time that I got on stage fronting a band. I'd done choir in church and at school, but this was like, oh, wait a minute, what this is my must. And then a year abroad, I came home just ravenous for I must. I had no idea how. It was just must. And so came back to Montana, graduated high school, and then packed up my world and headed to the West Coast to make my way to Nashville. Why? We don't know why. It's just what happened.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about that journey out west.
Sure. Well, and California was familiar. Nashville was foreign. I know that sounds strange saying I'd just been in Switzerland, but Nashville, I have always held it in such high regard. I wanted to be ready. California was familiar. It was close. I knew I could drive home if I needed to. Like you can always drive home from Nashville. And I was 19 years old. I was just like, just figuring it out. So I ended up learning so much there from being in situations. I honestly think I'm a little like, Forrest Gump, because these situations would happen. I'd be like, how am I in a recording studio right now with Dionne Warwick? Like, I don't understand. Like, how is this happening? So all these really interesting things would happen, and that would just lead to the next thing. I would always have jobs that would be something that could help my future business. So if it was continuing my French, like languages are such an advantage. It's leverage, right? So how do you create opportunity? And clothing business. So I worked on all sides of the clothing business because I knew one day that I would want to have my own line of merch and, build that part of my music company. So I always just kind of, did that. Meanwhile, having really wild opportunities of, performing in front of thousands of people in these different, from the women's conference with Maria Shriver. And so it just all kept growing. And it was, I felt like October of 2011, I got this feeling in my gut that said, it's time to go to Nashville. You're ready. Now, at this point, I'm full-time music. So I'm like, okay, I really can just go and immerse myself. I went full-time music in 2010. And it just, I can't explain it other than it was just like, go. And so that's what took me there in November of 2011. And then I essentially threw out everything I thought I knew about anything. And just from the ground up, I would go to songwriter rounds and go up to complete strangers and just say, I want to write with you. And they'd be like, okay, let's start with coffee. I'm like, no, really, we should write a song. I even remember one, I was like, oh, let's write together. And like, okay. And it took us about 3 years of getting to know each other before we got to write together. But it really is, that craftsmanship that happens with songwriting. Yes, you can get really lucky on a first song. I am not that girl. It took me a lot of songs to really learn the craft, and I'm still, I still have so much to learn, but that was really incredible. And by, spring of 2012, I was performing at my very first CMA Music Festival, which was my first time going to it. So there were just all these really just extraordinary opportunities that you just, when you can say yes, if you're prepared, you can be ready for luck, right? So
I love that idea, and it's such a fascinating one, right? When you went out to California, did you have opportunities lined up when you went out there, or were you just like, no, I'm going out there and I'm gonna see what happens? Okay.
Just I'm what now. My parents would probably say this about me as well. Sometimes when I get, when I decide, I'm like, it's I actually have a song that I wrote that said, sometimes you got to grow your wings. And sometimes you gotta, you've got to take the risk to meet the risk, and that was one of the things that really struck me when I went full-time music, because before that I was just, making ends meet and then working to make my music. And also finding that a lot of people will say to you, man, you're great, let's change everything. And you're like, what how do I, and I can't dance, it's like not gonna happen. And so that's when I really started, getting that I'm going to do this myself, and I'm going to control the narrative and create with people that want to elevate that. And really, what do they say? Seek water, there's a great quote that I'm botching right now.
Rising water raises all ships.
Yeah, like find people that take you up and don't take you down.
Gotcha.
That really want you to be your best. And so, I was going to Nashville with all that. Just like I gotta just figure this out. So yeah, going to the West Coast, I just, like I'm going to figure this out. And I think that when it's a must for you, when you have to do something, you believe it so much that you find a way. I think when the belief is so strong and no one can kind of like rattle that, they can maybe, push you over for a minute, but you pop back up like a weeble wobble. You find a way. I just truly feel that way with any business. If you want something, you will find a way to make it happen.
And I'm curious, which came first? Did you decide that you were going to make a career out of music first, or did you decide you're going to do it your own way first? Or did they happen at the same time?
That's a great question. I think that's the first time I've ever been asked that question. So that's really an incredible question.
Well, thank you.
The music was first. The must of music and making this my career was first. It was through a lot of conversations and interactions that I realized that if I can establish a foundation and create an environment that brings people together in a way that want to do this with me, because there's no way you can do it on your own. Like when I say that, I mean, I didn't sign to a major label. We created a label, and that started with the opportunity to self-invest, which is so important, from getting a song licensed and putting that money into that. And just saying, okay, we're gonna do this. And then you find your tribe, you find your people. You that doesn't happen quickly. And I think for me too, it really was, how do I stay true to me and authentic to me where I can sleep at night? And how do I create something for my, at this point, I didn't have the flock of Quayle, which is our fan family, but how do I create something that inspires? And then, a little girl sees me on stage and I say, no, you absolutely can do anything. And she goes out and she becomes the next to cure cancer or whatever that is. So I take that very seriously. I don't take myself too seriously, clearly, but when it comes to my purpose and my mission, it's like no one can rock that. No one, no amount of money, no potential opportunity, because it's not that doesn't have the value that it does when you can actually be a part of being a part of someone's story in a big way.
Did you begin to feel momentum? You said it took 3 years before you really got a little bit of traction in Nashville. When did you start?
I mean, it's still taking years.
Yeah.
But no, I think what happened, when I was able to go full-time music, I felt my purpose. So I was like, okay, now I have to find a way to pay my bills and stay afloat and keep building. Nashville, I learned the power of a song. Nashville, I learned that a song can change everything, and a song, it all starts with the song. So what do you want to say? How do you say it differently? There's only so many emotions, so it's been so many steps to get to what I would say 2016 was really the beginning of this compounding momentum. And that was when, I heard a little song called Drinking with Dolly. And that song just hit every single emotion I could see the song. And it was one of those times where, I got some pushback about, this is a very traditional sounding country song, and we don't know if it'll get accepted by country radio. And I said, you know what, that's okay. The song has to be heard. The song's has to be heard, and it's written by Rachel Proctor and Victoria Banks, and they're extraordinary artists, songwriters in their own right. And I remember hearing that guitar vocal and where I was seated in the studio, and it just became like, no, it has to. I'm very much a have to. I'm all in or I'm not. Miranda Lambert has a great quote: if it's a maybe, it's a no. Mm. Woo! I mean, did you feel that quote? I just felt that quote. I love it. So that was really the beginning. And that's where our fans, we created this idea of the flock of quail. My last name's Quayle. It's a fun play on the flock of seagulls. It's a cute little bird. I mean, like, we can have some fun with this, and we can all flock together. And it was just fun. And we had no idea if it was going to make sense and if it was going to catch on. And it caught on. And fans all across the world rallied around that song, and the women of country. And this is 2016, so it wasn't ahead of its time, but it was a conversation that has been a conversation in music for forever, right? Especially our genre. And that has created so many more opportunities, even leading up to me performing at Dolly Parton's 50th anniversary as a member of the Grand Ole Opry. So, and that was the very first song that I played when I got to make my debut at the Grand Ole Opry, and I'm pretty sure you have that picture.
Yeah.
Wow.
Pull it up. So tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yes. Yeah. Man, I could just cry looking at that picture. So for those that aren't familiar with the Grand Ole Opry, there is no greater stage in country music. In our genre, it is a rite of passage when you get to step into that circle. It's like something changed in me, you guys, as an artist, as a writer, as a musician, as an entertainer, as a human. The stage has always been the place where I feel like I make the most sense. Everywhere else, I kind of feel like a fish out of water. I'm just kind of a weirdo. But that just, I don't know. I got to go out on stage before and just kind of take it all in before, everyone got there, and before everyone filled the aisles and the seats and the pews. And I just got to soak it up. And I have I'm so grateful and humbled by that experience. And I when I got off the stage after performing and just kind of had to that just happened. Not only did I recognize that I'd absolutely earned that opportunity, and that when you get to earn it, when it's not handed to you, it's like tenfold, hundredfold. It's just so exquisite. And then also, I just felt this incredible responsibility to continue to strive for excellence with everything I do musically, so that 50 years from now, they'll still want me to be on that stage in that circle. That was just, there's a whole section from Montana too. There was a whole section. My whole family was there. It was just, spectacular night.
And did that help feel that you validated those? You said earlier that people wanted to change everything about who you were. Do you feel that was kind of a validating moment for you?
Completely. The great part of being where I am and being where I was in this picture is total self-ownership. This is who I am. This is what I stand for, through my music, through my person. And not everyone has to like everyone. That's okay. But to be able to share the music, it really was, it's wonderful when you get to be yourself. It's so much easier. It's just really lovely when that has, it's just, it's indescribable, because you don't have to try. There's no try when you're being yourself. There's a great quote: be yourself, everyone else is taken. And absolutely validating, because I'll take you back to age 22, when I was told I was too old. 22 years old. When I think about how many young artists, female, male, doesn't matter, uh, imagining telling them that they're done or they're over. When people, our words are so powerful. And if everyone just would maybe wait to react and hold on to those words and make sure that those words elevate. And even if it's a criticism, or criticism's great, criticism makes you stronger. It makes you, if you're willing to look at it honestly, right? But if we all just kind of like packaged it in a way where it like, I don't know, man, when I think back to those people, absolutely, like, me, I'm like, okay, tell me no. Like, I'll find a way. And there's no can't and Quayle was always my little phrase as a, like, I'll show you. But, and that fire in my belly, I've always had that since I was a teeny tiny human from whatever I was doing. But when you think about our words, they're just so powerful. So I absolutely had a few moments. I was like, all right, I guess we'll be all right.
Sure. And one thing, go ahead, Mark.
That story you just told about the person who told you that you were too old, was that what was going on in your head when they were saying that fire that came out, or was there another reaction in there?
I was kind of like, it was so funny to me because Dolly's what, 70 something now. Loretta and Willie are in their, I believe in their early 80s. So it's kind of like, well, that's a stupid thing to say. But then when I, like my immediate was like, well, okay. And then the next was like, how many other people have been told you're to this, or you're to that, or you're done, or there's no place for you. Imagine all of the delicious, incredible creativity that got stifled because someone said you're not, or you're this. And so one of my goals with my life purpose is to really just break all that open and to really just inspire those that there's no expiration date on awesome. Like you just keep doing and creating. We're always trying to put people in little boxes, right? Like, oh, you can't do that because you're this, or you can't do that. Well, there's certain things like, yeah, I'm probably never going to play, professional basketball. I am 5'4". Like there's certain things here that like, okay, I get it. I also am terrible at basketball, but you get my analogy, hopefully. And, I don't know. I just want everyone to, behave and be awesome.
Well, I know I've had my fair share of naysayers over the years. Do you think that your drive to work against that or use it as fuel, was it something that you've had to develop over time, or have you always had that ability to do that?
Well, I have always had the ability to speak out for what I believe in from when I was a real little teeny tiny child. My parents referenced the story, and that didn't have anything to do with music. It had to do with, I saw some little kid be not so nice to some other little kid, and I had to just go handle the situation. I think I was 4 or 5. So I think that I've always been one that when I see things, just not right, having to, say something.
And
You mentioned also, sorry,
that's
keep
okay.
doing that. You mentioned also that you were bullied when you were younger too. Does part of this drive, is it born out of that experience also?
Well, absolutely. It has to have, because I have so many, I have that personal experience, but I have such empathy and understanding for what it feels like to be misunderstood, to just be the wrong person at the wrong time, or the right, it depends on how you look at it. It gave me empathy for understanding what that feels like, for sure. One thing I didn't take away was bitterness. that only, Maya Angelou has a great message about the difference between anger and bitterness. And bitterness only infects the host. Anger creates action, right? And so I absolutely am a voice for those that I know and those that I don't when it comes to just the treatment, the humanity. I think that as I've grown in this business, the power of our voices, right? We all have such extraordinary platforms. So, how to really drive home that conversation of we're all in this together. I mean, we're experiencing that in the most phenomenal way right now because we're in a global pandemic, right? Where never have we had this kind of access to each other. And then on top of it, we're all experiencing this in very different ways. So it's such an interesting time. And so I think even more so, I found myself going, okay, how can I be a vessel of good? Is it reaching out to my friends who are in apartments by themselves, completely isolated, that are scared, that are, whatever it is, to our families, doing more of whatever, so that's just a part of me, and the music it's all integrated. You'll see it in the lyrics I write, the lyrics I choose. You'll see it in who I associate myself with from every layer, and that's just, I like that I can sleep at night.
And
Very
I
much.
wanted to go back to your Opry debut. I had a
Yes.
question about it's kind of related to two things we talked about already.
Okay.
And one of those, going back to not changing. One thing that strikes me about your music is how you seem, channeling might be too strong of a word, but you really do bring that kind of the sound of, it's like a modern version of the old souls or the traditional country, as you put it.
Yeah.
Um, and have you, in your experience, have people been really hungry for that type of music right now?
You know, it's interesting because I didn't really know, when it's you're the person, right? And I'm like, I'm just singing. Like this is just what and I've had people try to take my twang and I'm like, nope, 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 nope. There's plenty of others. You can, but that again was a learning process. So I've found that I'm this blend of this, I love the traditional country and I love blending it with uh, my style, which has the Western and the modern and this kind of like, stuff, and you mix it all together and you get me. I do love it when people say things like that it feels like that throwback or that old soul. That's awesome, and that it brings that nostalgia without being kitschy, or there's a lyric that has more of a modern meaning, but then my sound that blends it together. So I'm really proud of that, and that's been something that's taken cultivating it and just working on it. I'm a constant work in progress.
Yeah, and you described it better than I could, and I think the combination of you being yourself with that type of music kind of brings a double positive to your music, which is
I
refreshing.
thank you for that. I love it. It was interesting. Last week, I drove. I drove to Nashville, and we've been recording virtually for this last 100+ days of being here, and all the everyone is in isolation in their home studios or whatever. And so it was really interesting. I'm like, do I still know how to do this? Like, am I am I still me? Do I still, I sing all the time, virtual concerts, but you don't have that visceral interaction that we all live for with live music. And so I got to go into the studio last Wednesday and sing 2 new songs that we've been in the process of recording everything else. virtually. And so I got to, I was back home in Nashville, and it was like, I don't know, just this peace washed over me. And it was so wonderful to be able to sing and create and know that eventually it'll get to the world. And that's very, as an artist, as a creator, as a songwriter, musician, I'm not very good at being stagnant. I've got to keep, you got to keep moving and creating. So it was really, really incredible to feel that sense of, this is absolutely where I need to be and what I need to be doing.
So what do you find particularly difficult, and what do you find particularly easy about what you do?
Right now, or just in life?
Your choice.
Both. I think, well, with anything, with any startup business, with anything, with any entrepreneur, it's, you want to stay relevant, you want to keep creating, you want to, be heard. I think that some of the challenges come with just, being, you got to just make your way. So I've been doing this a long time, but I'm still at the beginning. I'm still, I'm so proud, when What You Drinking About, charted, and it's on the Billboard charts, and it's growing and it's making its way. It's like, you think about it from the standpoint of, when a YouTube video, like one of mine, hits 1 million, I'm like losing my mind, and I'm so excited. And then, there's like the Bieber over there that, in like 50 seconds gets 1 million, and you're like, okay, we'll get there. We'll get there, Bieber. We will get there. But it's, it's all relative, right? And so I think that it's the biggest challenge is having patience. I think that I'm learning a lot about the power of timing, and even more so now, just because it's all right in front of our faces, right? Because we don't really know what next week's going to look like. So we're really having to be present more than ever before. We can make all our plans. We really have no idea what it's all going to look like, So really being patient with myself, patient with the process, I think that's the greatest challenge. And for me right now, the greatest challenge is not being able to hug everyone's necks and tell them how much I love them on a face-to-face, like, I just want to just love on everybody and know that they're okay. Our fan base is so extraordinary. And we have all these families all over the world, and I've watched their littles grow up, and so, for those that get to come to shows and I get to hear the stories, like I'm highly invested as a person, because I love people. So that's been the biggest challenge. I was walking down the sidewalk in Nashville with my dog, and I was saying hello to every stranger. And they're like, okay, weirdo. But I'm like, hi, how are you? Are you doing okay? Like, so I'm such a people person that this has been a real a growth challenge, though. It's we have such an opportunity to be better. So I'm working on that.
Has the pressure mounted as you become more successful? Which was more successful, kind of before you started tasting some success, or has it been lately?
Oh, that's a great question too. You are good. You got good questions. I think that you have to be so careful with success. I think that I look at it like this, and I don't know if this really answers your question, but I'm going to do the best I can. If I don't answer it, then ask me again. I think that we pride ourselves on recognizing the success, honoring it, knowing we earned it, that we're so proud because we're breaking records. We're showing these challenges that we'll meet them head on. And then we go right back as if nothing had happened. So I think that with success, you have to be so careful that you don't drink too much of the Kool-Aid, because the Kool-Aid can really, change your outlook to where you're not making decisions based on fact and data. And it, like, when people start saying yes, you got to be real careful. And we have a really amazing team of like honest, hey, that song is not good. Or, hey, that note right there wasn't quite, or, that thing that you said, we think we have a very open dialogue in the team because I want to be my best. And I don't ever want to get to a part where I'm like, oh, I'm great. No, I'm fully there. Don't need to learn anymore. I don't ever want to be that person. So I think that it's just recognizing it is so awesome. Like even when you're introducing me, I'm like, oh yeah, that happened. It's like a real thing. That's awesome. And you gotta like own those moments for sure. I just tend to own it in the moment, and I'm grateful for it, and it's humbling, and I'm so proud because we have an extraordinary team of incredible humans that work tirelessly to make all this possible. And then it's like, okay, let's go. We've got so much more to do, and how can we be better? Again,
you obviously have a very and sounds like have always had a very kind of bold, confident, resilient mindset and approach. Has there ever been a time when that has faltered at all?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yes, it was a very specific moment. So back in 2009, January of 2009, I was in a relationship, and I dealt with death of a grandparent and that, but I'd never experienced anything tragic. And my boyfriend at the time died in a plane crash, and it was a very defining moment because it made me ask myself the question, what's the point? So, number one, and lights and, sold out stadiums and all that's great, but what's the point? What's the purpose? And so I had to, it took months to even get back on a stage, to be willing to sing. And when I got on that stage in that little dive bar, I was not the same person I was, from the standpoint of how I delivered a lyric, how I shared my emotions. And there was a vulnerability in me that I didn't know was there, that I tapped into from okay, how can I make this a positive? And how can I make this, a part of my story that doesn't define me, but absolutely gave me empathy like I had never, obviously I'd never experienced that before. So how could I say, oh, I know how you're feeling? That's the most ridiculous thing you can say to someone if you've never experienced that, right? I'm like, you have no idea until you know. There's a statement. And so it really was just, it was okay, how do I get through this? And how do I make it count? So I never ask myself again, what's the point? Yeah.
And as sorry for that tragedy, but as an observer, it makes me wonder, so shortly thereafter, you made the decision to make music your life full time. Was there any connection with what you found about yourself?
I found that I threw myself into work. I would work and work and work and work and work. And that was my way, full transparency. That was my way of avoiding a lot of the emotions that kept, because grief is the most interesting friend. Grief will not finish its work until it's finished. And so I had to learn that about grief, and that it will be there until it's fully worked through all the different stages. It was unlike anything I experienced. So I was deep in work. And I remember being like, so not wanting to talk to Grief. Like, Grief, you just stay over here. Like, I'm busy working, and then finally it was like, wait a second. If I'm willing to work at this level to elevate someone else, what if I did that? What if I invested the same amount of heart, passion, time into myself? And that's when, like, oh, great. Grief's like, okay, great. She's going to be ready to really get through this. And it took a ton of time, and it took a lot, and you cannot make it go faster. So it was kind of like this, I think it was end of February of 2010, beginning of March, where it really was like, okay, we're going to work this out, and it's going to take the time it takes. And that was really, some of the most, I talk about stretching, I really got stretched as a human, and I had to face myself, and that can be scary and challenging. But I think all of those things make us so much better, and make us see things, in a just a greater way too. We don't really know what other people are going through. No one knew, I was keeping it all. Like, I didn't want to burden anyone, but when asked the question, I would absolutely meet it with honesty. And because what if someone else was going through something and just thought I wouldn't even have a clue? There's always an opportunity with every conversation we have to really help each other.
During that time, did you feel like there was an impact on your music?
Yes, for sure. I would say the most profound impact I saw and felt and heard was my voice. My voice had a new depth. I don't know if anyone else could hear it. I absolutely could hear it, feel it, and experience it. And how I would deliver certain songs. One that comes to mind is now, and this is again years later, when we recorded Ugly. And that came out, what even year is it now? It's 2020, 19, so this was 18, I think. Yeah. And singing that song, and every time I sing that song, there's so much greatness that comes from experience and memories, right? You can pull in that pain, and you can remember it and feel it and recognize it and share it. But then it's all about that release, and how do you get to the other side? A lot of times with my music, I don't tend to see songs of bitterness. I don't tend to hang out there. I think that's a slippery slope for me. There's some artists that have made incredible careers out of it, and that's just not a place that I hang out. I can visit it, right? But I definitely wouldn't want to live there. And I do find that other songs that I write, and there's some songs that I wrote back in 2009 that I won't finish. I just won't. Or I won't yet. I don't know. Maybe I will one day. But there are, and I could play them for you right now, which I will not. I don't have a piano, but I can remember those because it was such a moment branded in my brain and in my heart and in my person, that I think that, with these challenging times that most of us will or have experienced, they're all opportunities if you're willing to learn from them and grow and then share it, right? And that's one thing that I'm very open about, because if someone watching this and listening to this is going through something, now I haven't sang a note, we haven't played one of my songs, but this conversation could really help someone. That's amazing. And that's our greater purpose, right? And so, yeah, that's how I love music and I love singing and all that, but like the higher purpose is to, be the greatest hug we could ever give, to those that we might not ever get to meet.
It's such a powerful thing to be able to connect with that. I would imagine, though, and correct me if I'm wrong, that at times it can be challenging in the music industry to stay aligned with that purpose.
I mean, that's definitely not like for the weak-hearted, but also you have to look at it like, yeah, I mean, if it wasn't hard, everyone would do it. It's like, that's what they say all the time about, even entrepreneurship, uh, it's like an endless, um, how to keep going and doing. I mean, the music industry is one of the most fascinating creatures ever. And I think that's a huge part of it is I love the challenge. Yes, it can take you to your knees for sure. Uh, and then, you can sit in a room with complete strangers and create something called a song that changes your life. I mean, it's bonkers.
It's got goosebumps.
Well, it's funny. As a side note, I've been watching that new television series Songland, where
Yeah,
bring on the different writers, and it's always so interesting to me how powerful music is. There's so much research surrounding
completely.
like how much, how and why it affects us the way that it
Yeah,
does. But even watching that show and just getting little snippets of songwriting, you just
completely.
see that.
Oh, I love that show. I love watching that show because it's amazing how just a turn of a word, or for the sake of the time we're living in, the pivot of a word, can really just completely open up a song in a way where you're just like, holy moly, or the tempo change, or little tiny things that can make such a massive difference. I think it's such a testimony to life, right? Like, we might think it's a small change, but it could be the change.
Mm,
I love
How
that show.
much how much do you attribute your writing of poetry to giving you a leg up, as far as songwriting?
I would say that it absolutely, I would love to go sit with the little version of me and be like, can I just ask you what was going on that you would write this poem? Because I can remember one very vividly where like the context of it makes no sense whatsoever. And it's like, you don't even know what this is, 7-year-old. Like, what are you talking about? But yeah, I do think so. And I love poetry. I always have. I've been drawn to it. I love to read. I did find that when I moved to Nashville, I learned to say what I was trying to say. And that was where you have to, a simple song does not mean it was easy to get to. You know, make no mistake, some of the simplest songs have the most complex, how they got there, because again, songs are just such wild little magical divine creatures in their own right. But, a lot of times, I remember meeting with a songwriter at NSAI and going through my songs, and I remember him saying, like, what are you trying to say? And so, how to take the poetry and make it work for you and not against you, especially in songwriting. And I think what is so sweet about country music is that it's these stories where you feel like you're right there. You can see it, you can hear it, you can feel it. And so that was a challenge for me as a young songwriter, really learning, okay, what am I trying to say? And I was yesterday, I started writing a song, and just really, this is what happens every time I pick up my guitar to play another song. I'll hit a chord and then I'll be like, oh, that could be cool. And so that happened yesterday, and I could see it, and it had its poetic liberties, and it felt, and then it also had just like, you could see it. And I think that's such a cool part of, our what we're able to create. And I think that's why I love the visual medium of creating music videos for almost every single song, because I think when you can see, we make these little mini movies, and that's just really, it's really cool.
It's so interesting to think about the visual pieces you mentioned, as someone who grew up in, the MTV, high
Right.
video, song
Right.
video culture, to now that's shifted so much in some ways.
Hmm. Well, now they're like 10 seconds or 15 seconds. Now everything is like so micro, right? And so one of the things that with our, like, If I Was a Cowboy, when we shot that in Montana, we made that like a movie. we were like, you know what? We are in Montana. We have nice weather. It's not snowing. We have a couple of days to make this all happen. And I loved making that video because I could see it before it was made. And, to work with a director like Jeff Johnson, who did that one, he also did the Selfish music video. And you put them side by side and they feel like completely different worlds, And I love that. And when we shot What You Drinking About, that was so much fun because I put the husband to work, and, he's my, little cowboy. So I love that because you can just then create a whole nother experience. We all see a song in our minds when we hear it for the first time, I think. And then I feel like a lot of us do. And then when you get to see it, it's like, oh yeah, check that out.
That must be rewarding when you can, because there have been several projects, not songwriting obviously, but things that I could only see myself. And then when it finally comes to fruition, other people are able to see it. So that must be rewarding to have that experience every time.
Yeah, it's super cool.
What do you view as the keys to your success?
What do I think's the key?
Yes.
I just think the key is, it's just that relentless perseverance and determination. And that also the authentic space that we strive every day to keep and create and continue and elevate, with every song, it's like writing a better song, right? You're like, okay, how can you make that better? And with every recording, it's like, okay, how can you take it to another level? And not shifting, but expanding. And I think that's the key. And also, this is a big part of it. And I remember this because it was 2008 when I ran the LA Marathon, which I will never do again. Let me be clear. One and done. But I chose to do it. I only had about 2 months of planning. I'm like, I'm going to do the marathon. This is, I don't suggest this. If you're going to do a marathon, give yourself like a year to prepare. So I remember running the marathon, and it was like mile 19, which, by the way, they're 26 miles, 26.2, I believe, not 23. Also got a little in my brain was probably very hungry at mile 23 when I was like, I'm done, not done. And, but mile 19, I remember it so vividly because I remember there was a moment where it was just like, okay, should I just call it? Like, no one's going to know. No one's going to really know if I finish. You go through all these things in your mind where you like convince yourself it's okay to quit. And I remember like I'm slowing down a little bit, and I look to my right and I look to my left. Now, not like a quick, like, okay, this. I turned my neck both ways, and it slowed me down. Paying attention and focusing on the people passing me. And I remembered having this conversation with myself. I'm like, you got to remember this moment right now. And so I'm like, all right, I'm going to, I took some ice, everyone's so kind on the sidelines of the marathon. They're handing you anything you can. I remember like squeezing ice in my hands so hard to try to not think about the pain in my knees as I'm like, I'm probably in slow motion in real life, but in my mind I was running, and I remember a friend of mine seeing my name on my bib, on my number. And they're like, Quayle. And I'm like, Lord? Like, what? And it was one of my friends. And she came out and she ran like, I don't know how long with me. And just, she was there in that moment. And I was able to keep going. And I remembered looking back on mile 19. In our industry, in all industries, sometimes people get ahead faster than others. And the ladder goes up and the ladder comes down. And I've really, it is a daily focus to recognize what's going around you, but not let it change where you're going, right? If you are headed in a direction that you are determined to get to, it is always good to know what's going on around you. I have tons of friends that we all started at the same time, that are, some have number ones and some have left entirely. And it's just the nature of it. And it's one of those things that's good to see what's going on, but don't let it derail you. Because, I mean, just, when you look this way versus when you turn and you're seeing who's coming up, it will slow you down. So I think that's been a really good visual experience for me that I think about often, because it's such, I mean, man, you just try it. Just try it when you're walking in the grocery store. It will, like, your body just can't. You're like, I got to slow down.
Wow. Was there a moment that you recall that you had to talk yourself into staying in the music race, so to speak?
There have absolutely been some times where I've questioned, and then just like that, something will happen. It's like just when you need a little something to remind you. And it's not necessarily a big thing. Like, now I say big thing from the, the claims of our industries, right? Like an accolade or an award. It could be a message from a mom that says, I didn't know what you stood for. And when my daughter met you, I was so glad to know that she could look up to you and not be disappointed. Okay, I'm gonna keep going.
Sure.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give an aspiring entrepreneur or music
Person.
hopeful? Yeah.
Well, let's start with the music side of things. I think that for young aspiring, I mean, there's so much opportunity. There's so many ways to get your music heard right now, just from your home, right? Like, or apartment or wherever, your garage, anywhere. And I would say focus on what you want to say. And for those that are aspiring songwriters, like, it is a job. It's a craft. You can be great at it. You can learn to be great at it. It just takes, it takes time, like anything else. And I think to songwriters that want to be artists, being able to be self-contained, I've never been more aware of that than this last 100 some days of being able to perform just me and a guitar and share that and not have to rely on, anyone else. Do I miss my band to no ends of the earth? Yes. Do I so want them to play the solos and have no one ever hear me go ever again? For sure. But I think that self-containment just gives you such ownership in your music, and it becomes second nature and muscle memory. And I think that's so important. And for those that want to be entertainers, study the greats. Go to a Garth concert, but when you can, when we are able to. But I Taylor, George Strait, I go to concerts and I study. My poor husband, he's like, we're going to a concert. I'm like, I know, but I'm doing my homework. You have a great job. And I'm like taking notes. I take them on my phone, so this is more accurate. But I was at the George Strait concert, and the sweet people from the crew saw me, and I'm like taking notes. I'm like, okay, he chose that song, and I was okay. He's doing this one. They're like, can we give you a set list? I'm like, okay, yes, it's amazing. Like, cause you're kind of intense. Enjoy the show. So I would say all those things for the music side, and for musicians, I mean, just it's every day. I'm an okay musician. Like, I say that because if you spend 30 minutes in Nashville, you will see some of the greatest musicians in the history of the world everywhere. So I am good at doing what I need to do. Tons of room for improvement, 1,000%. But for the musicians, like, just if that is what you want to do, that is a total available career where you could just end up playing guitar every day for the rest of your however long you want to play it for. So that's amazing, and drummers and track guys, like the track world is amazing. Now for the entrepreneurs. If you want a weekend, go get a 9 to 5. If you want to sleep in, entrepreneur is not if that's like, if it, like, entrepreneurs, I feel like it's got to be like it's got to feel like it's the only thing. And I mean that relatively speaking, meaning that this is a must for me. It's been a must finding my way. When I get an idea to create something, it's a must. I find a way. I think that if that's not in you, then don't. There are extraordinary opportunities to be a part of a team. You don't have to, run it yourself and create. It just depends on what makes you tick, like what gets you so excited where you can't wait to get up in the morning. And now, fortunately, my husband and we're both entrepreneurs. So we tend to, okay, like let's do this and let's do this and we could do this. And that endless kind of like how to create more good, right? But it really depends on, what gets you so excited. I never knew what a weekend was up until this last 100 plus. So it was hard for me to relate to wanting a Friday. It really was. And now I get it. I totally get it. And I look forward to the weekends now, which is like reversal, right? Because in music, you're usually, that's when you're on the road, and Sunday, Monday is kind of your, kind of your downtime or whatever. And now I understand it in a way that I never did. I understand having dinner, with your person, and at a time that you decide on. This is all new territory, and it's beautiful. So, it's just really like what, create your world in here and then find a way to make it all make sense. Now, there are awesome entrepreneurs that get to sleep in. I am damn impressed. That's awesome. There's always all different ways. I just think that, it can't be a plan B. There can't be another option. I think that's really important. Like there's like, especially in music, and if there's something else that you're more excited about, like how can you make that your job? And then music, you love it, well then just do it for fun and don't put yourself through, losing the love. I've told my team 1,000 times that if the love and the passion for what I can do by myself with no one watching, playing my guitar, writing a song, if that loses its luster, if that loses its spark, then something has gone wrong. And then we got to like evaluate, because then that's that sparkle and that magic that happens with live music and with all of that stuff. If it doesn't happen right here, how are you I'm not that good an actor.
Well, and then it's hard for the music to connect with people in the ways that you want it to.
And I think that even more so, pardon me, but I feel like now more than ever, you guys can feel it. Everyone can feel it when you're like, that's not honest.
I'm curious, you mentioned, something that has come up in conversations quite a bit with colleagues and clients, this idea of the things that we're learning about ourselves and having to shift and all that now, and what we might take with us when the world hopefully sometime soon moves forward and out of this, and what we might leave behind. And so what are your thoughts on that? What are some things that you might take with you, and what are some things you might leave behind?
That's great. I'm going to leave some of the self-criticism that was hanging out with me March 10th. I think March 11th is when I got here. That I'm going to let that stay back in early 2020. I feel like we're all so critical of ourselves, right? And we see it everywhere. We've got to, be this, and we're filtered, and we're all these different things. I think that I've learned that, what? I'm going to eat the bread. I'm going to enjoy all this precious time. And if I stay up a little late and have great memories with my family and I still got to get up early, I'm going to soak up the moments more. I think that's definitely something that I've found myself doing more than ever through this time, is like really like just soaking up this time. Because, I don't wish this had happened, but because this has happened, it's allowed me to have connective time with my husband and my stepkids and my family, and in ways that, had it not happened, I don't know that we would have gotten that opportunity. So it's a very strange thing. I know we're all wrestling with these conversations, right? And I would say that time is our greatest commodity. So how do I specifically self-manage that? And really, I am the queen of yes. I'm like, yeah, I love it. Let's do it. And so I think that really taking a moment and saying, okay, is this the best next step? There's so much strategy, and there's so much like, okay, well, if this happens, we'll do this. And we live in that world, obviously, as people in business in any facet, right? So we're always in that world. I think that really the value of the what it is, the value, not monetary value, the value, because I'm just so on fire for my purpose, and really wanting just to like, okay, how can we just do this with everybody and let them know that they're loved and heard and all those things. So I think that if anything, the evaluation process of the yes has shifted, and where I spend my time and how I spend my time. And also through these virtual opportunities, more opportunities have come about. So now it's like, okay, well, I probably can't get to Alaska next week, but could we do something super cool virtually to be able to connect? This is not a thing. I'm just using it as an example. But if anyone in Alaska would like to do that, that'd be awesome. You know what I'm saying? So I think that it's just really, looking at everything like, okay, through the finite lens and being in the weeds of it all. And then also like that big picture, so that at the close of the year in our family, we do a big, like reflection. And, I put my vision board for this year together on the 31st, which I have been carrying around in my back pocket every day since. And it's pretty mangled. It needs to be revitalized, but it has changed, right? Like life for all of us has changed so much. And my personal vision has been amplified for sure. So there are some words and some pictures, I use pictures because I'm very visual, that will need to be, updated. And that's exciting. That's good. So I would say that. What's something that you're going to leave behind?
Well,
either of you.
I'm planning to resume my Brad Pitt lookalike career.
Yes, I love it.
It didn't go as well as I wanted the first time, but since I've had a chance to reflect, I'm going to give it another shot. Lauren's going to get tired of that joke.
I'm going to take the more serious answer as a also kind of entrepreneur and person in business for themselves. Yeah. It's been very similar, trying to find what energy really feeds me and take the time, the forced time to figure out what direction I want to be moving forward in, not just the rat race that we were all in of moving forward.
It's really so, and it feels like it was like, okay, everyone pause. And however you want to look at it, now you have the time. You don't have the excuse of, I don't have the time. And time is one of the most interesting words that I have had. I have been at odds with the word time, but now time and I are friends, because it's all in how we say it, right? If I were to say to you guys, I just don't have the time, or, well, I have all the time. So again, it's just that quick shift that happens just by saying, I'm running out of time, or I have all the time. And these little things that we can tell ourselves to keep ourselves from believing the noise that can happen from all the things that we're told that we're supposed to, this, that, or the other, right? versus just be like, you know what, I got all the time. And that's that time and I should write a song. But it's true. It's really, I think that, I kind of feel like we're all like little rubber bands. We're all being stretched to just like, like little slingshots. Like, okay, I just had to pull you back for a minute before I could, let you go do all the things that you're meant to do. I don't know.
And my serious answer is pretty much the same. I'm had a chance to reflect on what it is that's important and what I want to retain and what I want to give up.
Yeah.
So I think we're all doing, at least those that those of us who are tremendously busy are having a chance to kind of look and see what it looks like and put it back together in a better way.
What's something that you learned about your wife that you might not have known, Kevin?
Right now he's thinking about what he can actually say without getting in trouble.
Don't get in trouble. Don't get in trouble.
We've been together a long time, so there wasn't a lot to find out, but it's kind of a cliche between the hearing some of her side of the Zoom conversations during our work meetings. I learned more about her work persona.
Right. Sure.
It's she's a really impressive coworker.
There's like a heightened appreciation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really cool. Yeah. No, I can relate to that. There's like, it's a beautiful thing.
And getting to see Lauren a lot more during these recordings has been a great thing.
Having this project, we both loved it. It's been such a fun thing to really get going during this time for sure.
So awesome. Well, I just think it's incredible. Like, again, like we are all in different states and we're able, to have this conversation, which I hope, there are little moments that people will be able to take with them and run with. And the incredibleness of just the fact that, when this comes out, it will be available to anyone, anywhere.
Sure.
And just to think that we live in a time where we can, I don't know, man, that's pretty wild.
Definitely. And so one of the final few questions, Lauren and I met in graduate school and we studied expertise.
What feels like many years ago now.
And so one of the things that we focused on was expert performance and expertise, how people in whatever the domain or area get good at what they do. So musicians, surgeons, so on. One of the questions that has been around probably since the beginning of humanity is that of nature versus nurture. And an extreme view of nature would be that you're born with everything you need. There's nothing on the outside needed to cultivate that. An extreme view of the nurture side would be you're born with nothing. Everything is reliant on what you encounter or the environment. And of course, there's everything in the middle. Where do you fall on that?
The spectrum of
continuum,
this?
Yeah.
That's man. You guys should do this because you're really great question. I would say that I think that I'm gonna just speak to my personal case. I was born with a voice that was able to be nurtured, and I was born with a personality that was able to be nurtured, and so I'm a blend, right? I have spent thousands of hours from singing to playing to writing to entertaining. I remember when someone said to me, gosh, I don't even know if I was 20 years old yet. They said, when your music matches your personality, then you'll have something. I was like, is that one of those backhanded compliments? Like, is that a compliment? But it was, my music wasn't where it needed to be at that time. And I think my personality showed up probably first, obviously. So I think there are some people that are tone deaf, and that is a thing that occurs, and they can't sing, and they can't, that is a natural thing that happens. I would have to ask my voice teacher if that's something that you can. I don't know. But I think that, look at like the, those voices that are just perfection. Alison Krauss, Celine Dion, Whitney Houston, Mariah Carey, Aretha Franklin. That that was a born holy shnikes. Did that just come out of a little kid and then cultivated and expanded upon and nurtured? But like if you've ever heard Alison Krauss sing, like it's perfection. That is something that ain't never gonna happen here, because it's yes, I can constantly get better, right, hopefully, and continue to expand my range and expand my skills. But then there's that inherent je ne sais quoi that you're just like, oh wow. I mean, that's just we see it in sports, we see it just in the sciences, and we see it across the board. So I don't know if that answers it at all, but I think that there's certain things I was born with that have made it possible for me to nurture.
Yeah, good answer. And then what's the biggest takeaway from your story?
Just don't stop. Just don't stop. No one can make you quit.
My new mantra is going to be mile 19, so I'm stealing that from you.
Oh, I love that. Oh, I tell you, man. Well, I mean, there's so many quotes about like the last mile, right? Like if you knew that you were 1 mile away from everything you ever dreamed of and worked for, and sleepless nights and all that, if you were 1 mile, would you quit?
And I think even more interesting, your story, right? You were several miles, and often that's a lot of times what happens, yes. Right? Is you're not actually that close, but I mean, you're so far, but you're also not that close, right?
Yes. Reminder. Marathon is not 23 miles. No, it really, it was such I go back to that, I mean, that was 100 years ago, not really, but you know what I'm saying? 2008, 12 years ago, good Lord. But what a lesson.
You asked about my wife earlier. That would be something that I would do, is convince her it was 23 miles and find out during the race it was longer.
Yeah. So. Yeah, man.
Well, Stephanie, we appreciated your story. We appreciated you joining us. It was very, I hope the listeners will check you out if they haven't already. And it was a fascinating story.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I appreciate you. Be safe. Stay healthy, wash your hands, do all the things. And I can't wait to meet you guys in person. And let's make sure that happens. Would love that once the world opens up. And Lauren, be extremely safe.
Yeah.
Up in
New York City is a fun time.
NYC. Yeah. But seriously, thank you guys so much for what you do and just for sharing my story. It's awesome. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for sharing. It was wonderful.
The Path Distilled is hosted by Kevin Harris and Lauren Tashman, created and produced by Kevin Harris. The content is copyrighted by The Path Distilled, all rights reserved.